Comedy cometh. Okay, I got you. Does censorship ruin the authenticity of comedy, Dr. Jonathan?
So I've been going back and forth with this concept around censorship, and I've landed on this idea that, we wouldn't tell a joke about somebody's mother's cancer. We wouldn't tell a joke about somebody dying. I mean, tragically, right? Like we laugh. So this is the thing that I think that, I struggle with in terms of censorship when we're looking at the conversation around someone's comedy is pushing a rhetoric that is killing someone, right? Like trans Black women have been killed more in the last 3 years than anyone else, right? So when we get to the root of this idea that we're censoring someone, no, it's not about censorship. It's about us ultimately saying we are not going to stand for you creating more rhetoric around trans or LGBTQ people that has already led to us dying. So I struggle with this idea that, it's censorship. No, we're ultimately saying if you have to stomp on someone to get a joke in this day and age, in 2002, that might have worked. But in 2021, when we know what transphobia is, when we know what homophobia looks like, we know how they're working, as a system, all oppression is connected. If you have to laugh at me and what I'm going through as a marginalized person, it says more about you and your character and the job that you have as a comedian and less about me as a queer person. So that's just kind of where I stand with that.
Red Fox had a joke on Sanford and Son where he was in the courthouse, and I guess there was someone in the courthouse who said, I don't know, cancer kills more Black people than anything else. And, Fred Sanford said, oh, I thought that was the cops. And that is a joke. But it also, it's a joke that talks about Black people being killed by the police. Right. So how do you rectify that joke and resolve it in terms of the transphobia world? Because there are a ton of cop killing jokes out here, and cops are killing Black people. So how does that balance out with what you just talked about in terms of transphobia or transgender women being killed? It seems like the same concept to me.
So I guess if I'm going to take this conversation, I struggle with this idea that we are going to align a joke about cops killing Black people with the same conversation around someone saying, I don't believe that trans women are women, right? Dave Chappelle said up front that he was a TERF. That period. And I think so this is something I've also been ruminating with, right? I guess with this idea about Fred Sanford and what he's talking about, right? He's, in my mind, using his creative platform to speak truth to power. This is a fact that this is happening, right? However, when you tell someone that you don't believe that trans women are women, what you are doing is you are greenlighting other people to start treating trans women in this idea that they are not women too. So I personally don't think we can align this conversation around someone saying, I'm going to use my comedy to speak truth to power with this idea that Dave Chappelle is now using his platform to say that trans women are not women. I'm also going to say this because I've been feeling the need to say this. I struggle with all this conversation because the same company, Netflix, I'm sure that when they do their hiring and when they do all of their work, they ultimately say, we love and we support LGBTQ people. We want you here, yada, yada, yada. For you as a company to say that you love us and support us, but then you are going to take a platform of someone who is a comedian that is ultimately harming us and aligning yourself with that, that's a problem for me. And I think that that's what the real conversation is, that yes, we can have conversations about what does the comedy look like, but the way it's impacting me as a trans femme person, that's something that I wish that we spend more time talking about, both on a level of comedy, but also at the larger conversation around the corporation as well.
Yeah, Tehran, I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, while I appreciate Dr. John Paul's perspective, and respectfully, I have to disagree. Because first of all, if you do not believe in the freedom of speech for those you disdain, you do not believe in the freedom of speech, period. And secondly, And secondly, I would like to say that the concept is we're having the most conversations around transphobia now because of Dave Chappelle than we ever had in the history. So while we're talking about Black trans women being murdered, we should also talk about this conversation that's happening because of Dr. John Paul and myself might never ever even have met under normal circumstances. And yet here we are having a conversation because that's what comedy's about. And just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. On the flip side, just because you're offensive doesn't mean you're right either. In the middle is this gray area, and that gray area is comedy. And it's the responsibility of comedy to push all narratives and all perspectives, because that is what comedians do. That is what comedians do, because comedians are the modern day philosophers. And it's not, the best joke isn't, haha, that's funny. The best joke is, that's so true. And it's just giving voices to people. So now you hear voices, and now we're hearing yours.
Whatever happened to knock knock, who's there? This comedy has really gone beyond comedy. I actually don't consider Dave Chappelle a comedian as much as he used to be. He's more of a philanthropist now, I guess you could say, or an activist, or whatever word you may put on it. He's a motivational speaker or just a speaker, but I sometimes don't find his stand-up funny as I do enlightening or even sometimes offensive. Samson?
All those things, Tammy, are a part of comedy. And, comedy can be church as it is when you come to one of my comedy shows. Comedy can also be philosophy, motivational speaking, all those things. But at the end of the day, comedy should challenge the way that you think in some kind of way. So to piggyback off of Tehran and all those brilliant points, to answer some of the doctor's very brilliant points as well, I will say that comedy itself and the brilliance of it, of that art form, is why we are here having the conversation. And I think we've achieved a lot by doing that.
Well, I'm going to achieve a lot by going to a commercial break and coming right back to keep talking about comedy. Ain't now one of y'all said nothing funny yet. I'm getting offended. I got comedians on the show and y'all ain't been funny yet. I need some funny up in here. We'll be right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mac on Fox Soul.